According to reports, OpenAI has sounded the alarm. That's because there's some increased competition from Google and even some surprising efforts from other AI players. And that's left OpenAI seemingly starting to lose its footing as the clear frontrunner in AI. And they've officially now called a code red, like all hands on deck, code word for kind of panic mode. And they're reportedly hitting a pause on some of the ChatGPT bells and whistles that many of us love. And they're trying to get back to square one, making better models, the area that Google has taken their lunch money on in 2025. So, can OpenAI even pause? I mean, they have more deals right now than going out of business Bed Bath and Beyond on Black Friday. And will a code red pause even work? After all, OpenAI has essentially started a handful of other businesses, ventures, and verticals that they weren't even involved with a year ago. So on today's show, we'll answer if OpenAI is still the king of the AI hill, or if this code red situation going on right now means that they've maybe lost the crown to Google. All right, I'm excited to get into it. I hope you are too. Welcome to Everyday AI. What's going on, y'all? My name is Jordan Wilson, and this is for you. This is your daily live stream podcast and free daily newsletter helping everyday business leaders like you and me not just keep up with all the AI news and developments. Yeah, you can tell by our opener there. There's a ton, but how we can make sense of them and make sound decisions to grow our companies and our careers. So if you're joining me on that journey, it starts here with the unedited, unscripted live stream podcast. But if you want to take it to the next level, make sure you go to our website. That's your cheat code. It is youreverydayai.com. We're going to be in our free daily newsletter, which you can sign up for there. We're going to be recapping the highlights from today's show, as well as bringing you all of the other AI news that you need to know. All right. Now let's get into it. Here's what you need to know about the new reports that say OpenAI is kind of in panic mode. They're hitting that siren. It is code red. They are losing ground. So on today's show, here's what we're going to dive into. We're going to investigate the internal code red panic inside of OpenAI following a brutal November. We're going to break down the data showing how Google and even Anthropic have overtaken ChatGPT in some key areas and answer the ultimate question. Is ChatGPT's default era over? And if so, who owns the future? I'm not going to make you wait. I'm going to go ahead and answer at least one of those questions right now. Is Google taking ChatGPT's crown? Well, kind of, but also no, not at all. And here's the explanation in that. I think that over the past 3 years, right, we are now more than 3 years into the ChatGPT era, which has obviously come to define AI. And I think that right there is enough to say that no, ChatGPT is not going to be losing its crown, at least when it comes to mindshare, when it comes to just the sheer number of people that they have using and relying on the platform every day. More on that later in the show. Because right now there's more players, there's more use cases, there's more verticals, so there's more hills to be a king of, right? Whereas, even 2 years ago, it wasn't really like this, right? It was AI chatbots, but now we have, agentic models by default. We have all of this scaffolding, all of these bells and whistles that OpenAI is apparently going to hit pause on, right? We have agents. We have business data that is synced dynamically, right, into these front-end large language models, right? Bringing RAG of 2023 to our fingertips in a matter of minutes. So the space has changed so drastically over the past 3 years since ChatGPT kind of introduced us to the space, which is ironic since Google actually invented the transformer and had a kind of technically a working version of something like ChatGPT public before ChatGPT even did. So while I do think Google may permanently take the lead in large language model development, and I'd say in 2025, they've been the winner hands down, I don't think OpenAI has much to worry about when it comes to market share. Well, at least not until we got all this code red talk from OpenAI. So here's what's going on. If you missed any of this in a nutshell, well, why? Why are they doing this code red? What's it all about? So, according to some reporting from both The Information and The Verge and others, OpenAI CEO Sam Altman reportedly issued a company-wide code red on December 2nd, so in the middle of last week, pausing some other big initiatives such as ads and some other projects. And this kind of internal emergency came after Google's Gemini 3 Pro launched on November 18th. And out of 20 pretty widely accepted benchmarks as industry standards, yeah, Google Gemini 3 overtook GPT 5.1 on all of them except one. So almost a clean sweep for Gemini's new model, Gemini 3 Pro. And followed that up, yeah, code red, a lot of things happening at once. You also had Claude, Anthropic's Claude Opus 4.5 come out the week after Gemini 3 Pro. And that became kind of the first model to score over an 80% on some real world coding benchmarks. Right. So even before all of this, and I'm going to get into some of the discrepancies and how we use ChatGPT and what model you're selecting. Right. But if I'm being honest, the default model of ChatGPT, not really good. All right. And so they just got hit with big release after big release, and that has reportedly caused OpenAI to hit that big panic button. I'm wondering if in these big companies, is there actually a button? Can someone tell me, right? Friends at big tech, let me know. That'd be great if there was. It'd be so cool. But I just imagine, right? Like someone just sweating in the back and being like, "Yeah, got to pop up the button. Time to hit it." But this is for the first time, I'd say, since ChatGPT came out at the end of November 2022. I say it's the first time that their position has been questioned as the overall AI leader. I would say even mid-November, early November of this year. So 5 weeks ago, I'd say if you looked at everything across the board, you would say, no, OpenAI is still comfortably in the lead. I don't think you can really say that anymore. And that's maybe what's caused OpenAI to get back to the basics here. So here's what's important. All right. So this is not the first code red, because what's interesting enough is Google was actually the first company to kind of put out a code red when it came to AI. So a lot of people, well, most people know Google invented the transformer, the underlying technology that ultimately led to ChatGPT and other large language models. But people don't even know Google had a working and live version of a AI chatbot, essentially an early preview version of Lambda in their AI kitchen well before there was a ChatGPT. But it was extremely limited. They didn't put a lot of resources behind it. It was a research preview, right? It was essentially for geeks, kind of like me. So when this came, right, it was bad news for Google. I think Google thought that maybe, this technology going mainstream was still maybe years away, right? They were pioneers in the technology, but the ChatGPT moment, right? And that's what it has become. It is a line in the technological sand, and in the, I think overall, it will, when we look back at it, it's going to be kind of like an AC, BC kind of or BCAC kind of situation, right? When we look at how businesses operate, just kind of there's like before internet, after internet. I think it's going to be before ChatGPT, after ChatGPT, or before large language models and after large language models. And it was that ChatGPT moment that caused that, and that did cause Google to go into what we're talking about now, which is their code red mode. And although I think that their initial response was not the best, right? Looking back at the early Bard days, their kind of snafu rollout in December of 2023. I mean, since December of 2024, so about a year ago, I think hands down, Google has been the leader in the AI space, right? I've always said it's 1A, 1B, depending on how you look at it. But I do think if you look at all things considered, Google has made up more ground. OpenAI was way far ahead in November of 2024, versus Google, and now they're neck and neck. So Google has grown more over the past 12 or 13 months, and I don't even think that's close. Um, so now it's the other side of the coin. Now it is OpenAI calling the code red after Gemini 3's launch and some other things. And like I said, this is the first time that I think public perception and even the markets, right, have said that maybe Google's the leader, right? So Wells Fargo now prices Google stock as the AI race leader for the first time since 2016. So here's a little bit more on the details of this code red. So this reportedly went into an internal memo, and it said, yo, we got to stop with the bells, the whistles, the features, and we got to get back to core model development. So this directive cited temporary economic headwinds from Google's benchmark topping releases, and also might lead to a new OpenAI model getting released as early as, check watch, today. Right. So report from The Verge said we might get a version of ChatGPT, maybe called GPT 5.2, as early as today. I've also kind of heard or seen it could be Thursday. Right. We've seen the dates float around, but it could be as early as literally today. So if you are listening to this podcast, it's a live stream podcast, 7:30 a.m. Central Standard Time in Chicago. Right. But maybe you're listening to this on your lunch break or your commute on the way home from work. There could already be a model out, right? We'll obviously have that news when it does break in our newsletter. But this essentially, all of this news accelerated the launch of this new model because we had heard previously that it might be released in January. And then we heard, oh, maybe the second or third week of December. And now all of a sudden it might be December 9th. So how the heck did this happen? Right? How did OpenAI go from, if I'm being honest, not really having any true competitors for the first 23 and a half months and having an almost unfair advantage, right? When it came to market share, when it came to features, when it came to UI, UX, when it came to just branding. I mean, you talk to anyone, you say something about AI and, everyone's like, you mean ChatGPT, right? They beat everyone to the punch and had an insurmountable lead. Yet here we are being like, are they losing it? Have they lost it? And in 2 years, are they even going to be in the conversation of the 1A, 1B? Well, here's one reason why I think we're in this position. OpenAI's focus, for better or worse, is much wider than it was a year ago, right? You could make an argument, depending on how you categorize these things. You can make an argument now that OpenAI has or OpenAI is 5 different businesses or has 5 very unrelated or not very much related departments. So as an example, right, you have your frontier large language models, right? That's your GPT-5 series, the actual models being built, right? Then you have your consumer ecosystem, right? Because some of these players out there, they just make models and that's it, right? And they put them out on the API or whatever, but they're not building an ecosystem. Obviously, with 800 million weekly active users, OpenAI is actively investing in a very vibrant ecosystem. And that comes with it a lot of challenges, a lot of those bells and whistles, a lot of these things that take time, right? They have a browser, their Atlas browser. They have the, obviously the ChatGPT app across web, mobile, desktop, Sora with video, GPT image, right? They have all these things. Then they have their enterprise and developer platforms. So the business and enterprise tiers of ChatGPT, the API side, the real-time agents SDK, et cetera, right? And then they have their new kind of upcoming hardware division or ambitions, we'll see, right? So custom AI chips, right? They're getting in the chip game, like NVIDIA, like Google with Google's TPUs, right? So it was reported that they're going to be working with Broadcom to develop an in-house chip that they will use and probably be selling or renting out to others. And then also on the hardware side, we've seen a lot of reports recently that we cover here on our Monday news shows. Um, OpenAI has been poaching like everyone from Apple's hardware division, but it seems like OpenAI is going to be making a serious play in the AI hardware space. We don't know what the device is going to be. We've seen reports it's not going to be a phone. It's not going to be earbuds or glasses. It's going to be something else. But they're building an AI hardware division, and they're getting real big players to go with them. And then, last but not least, they're an infrastructure company now. They are. They have more than $1 trillion of third-party infrastructure commitments, right? Building like literally the Stargate deal with Oracle and others. I mean, they're building just huge data centers. The CapEx spend is enormous, right? $100 billion plus already committed with an NVIDIA deal / investment, people calling, circular funding or vendor financing, whatever you want to call it, right? But those are areas that OpenAI was not even playing in for the most part a year ago, right? Aside from maybe the consumer ecosystem and a little bit on the developer platform, but at least half of these things didn't really exist a year ago. So maybe this is the give and take that a company must make in order to grow at the rate at which they want to grow. Sometimes you have to maybe throw expensive spaghetti at the wall and see what's going to stick. But this split focus has led to reported financial strain. So, according to reports from the Wall Street Journal and Fortune, OpenAI projects a $22 billion spend versus a $13 billion in revenue in 2025. Although Sam Altman did say that that number in revenue is going to be closer to 20 billion or a little above, yet it could anywhere be from, a couple $1 loss to up to $9 billion loss this year. And there have been estimates, right? And this estimate was wild. This HSBC estimate that said OpenAI may be meeting a $207 billion funding shortfall between now and 2030. Wow. So is this just a case of OpenAI being spread too thin? Is this an AI startup that, maybe should have just been an AI chatbot company and they wanted to take over the world and maybe they shouldn't have, and now they're losing their, luster. They're maybe relinquishing what they were known for? Or is it something more than that? All right, we're gonna find out in a minute. Quick break, word from our sponsors.
This podcast is sponsored by Google. Hey folks, I'm Amar, product and design lead at Google DeepMind. Have you ever wanted to build an app for yourself, your friends, or finally launch that side project you've been dreaming about? Now you can bring any idea to life, no coding background required, with Gemini 3 in Google AI Studio. It's called Vibe Coding, and we're making it dead simple. Just describe your app, and Gemini will wire up the right models for you so you can focus on your creative vision. Head to ai.studio/build to create your first app.
So I would say part of this slipping from the top of the AI mountain for OpenAI is because of its split focus, but the timing of everything else has added to it undoubtedly, right? So November has been a pileup of new model releases. One thing people don't talk about, well, OpenAI rolled out their own very powerful model in mid-November, GPT 5.1 Pro, right? But very few people have access to that because you have to be on the $200 a month plan. But then obviously, the big news here came on November 18th when Google launched Gemini 3 Pro, calling it their most intelligent model ever. And then the next week, Anthropic followed up with Claude Opus 4.5, really finding its space, targeting coding agents and computer use. So let's quickly just look at Gemini 3's reception, and it was good, right? People went nutty, and rightfully so, I'd say. When Gemini 3 came out, Gemini 3 Pro, it shattered every benchmark, right? Getting scores on benchmarks that, maybe a year ago we thought would not be possible for multiple years. One of them scoring a 37.5 on humanity's last exam, one of the newer data sets or benchmarks, since a lot of the previous ones like MMMU, MMLU, a lot of these previous benchmarks have kind of been saturated, right? Because all the models are, scoring off the charts or, close to 100 on some of these. So it's like, all right, some of them are saturated, but one that is not yet is Humanity's Last Exam, and Gemini 3 leapfrogged in front of everyone. And then just their sheer user growth all the way up to 650 million monthly active users, right? Versus OpenAI's 800 million weekly active users. Still, I think that's grown from 400 million just a couple of months ago. So Gemini is on fire, and Google is on fire in terms of user growth. And pretty good anecdote we shared here. This quote, I think the day it came out or the day after it came out, Salesforce CEO Mark Benioff publicly switched and put out a tweet. That's like, he said he's been using ChatGPT every year, spent a little bit of time with Gemini 3, and he's like, I'm not going back. And I think that was a sentiment kind of echoed by a lot of people, right? It was that big of a leap, not just that big of a leap, but I think that kind of the default chat mode inside of ChatGPT has been stalled. Again, more on that here in a minute. So Google has significantly eaten into OpenAI's market share. So this is a graph here for our live stream audience. You can see, and podcast audience, if you ever wanted to know, I never have anything overly visual, but if you want the video version, I don't know, you can take screenshots of me making weird faces. For the most part, you don't need a lot of video, but you can always see that on our website at youreverydayai.com. But you will see here, this is according to SimilarWeb data, which is extremely accurate. Looking at the market share over time, ChatGPT versus Google Gemini. So a year ago, OpenAI had 87% of the market share. Now, 71%. So a huge drop off. Whereas conversely, Google Gemini has been growing faster than anyone else. So a year ago, they only had 5.7% market share, and they've nearly tripled that now at 15%. So in the same period of time, maybe, some of the other players have maybe grown 0.5%, 1%, right? Google Gemini tripled, and most of that, right, came from ChatGPT's lunch. So when I say that they're eating ChatGPT's lunch on the model side and a little bit eating into their big pie, the numbers support that. And also, the sleeping beauty herself, Anthropic, finally woke up from its summer slumber and decided to ship something. And by something, an extremely impressive model. Yeah, we gave it the live run through here on the show a couple of weeks ago. It failed some of our live tests, but that's why I always tell people, right? You have to put it through your own paces, right? I think a lot of times when I'm doing tests on models, it's sometimes when the servers are overloaded, things get buggy, but Anthropic's Claude Opus 4.5, extremely impressive, right? Especially on any software development coding benchmarks. So the first model to ever get more than an 80% on the SWE bench verified, which is the industry's kind of, number one real world coding benchmark. Right. And I'll probably do a show at some point, maybe later this year or early next year, just really talking about why I think coding is more important from a benchmark perspective and from a company perspective than most people realize, right? And it's a little deep, right? It gets into AGI and some other things, but I'll probably talk about that. So not only that, but Anthropic finally, right? And I said this on the show a year ago, I said Anthropic is not going to survive as a company unless they reduce their prices to be competitive. Their API prices have never been competitive. And obviously, if you're on a paid plan using Claude on the front end, you can't use it. It stinks, right? The limits are so low, but they finally cut their prices by 67%. So again, when I said November was kind of a tough month for OpenAI, well, it was because its competitors came out and they came to play. They woke up for no reason and chose absolute violence. So speaking of Anthropic, the IPO rumors did not help OpenAI's cause either. So this was last week, just days before the reported OpenAI code red some rumors on Anthropic, laying the groundwork for an initial public offering. So this is from the Wall Street Journal. I'm going to read an excerpt here. So it says, excuse me. Yeah, still fighting this little bug, this little throat thing here. Got my medicine, my Topo Chico. So it says Anthropic, which has a growing number of business users because of the capabilities of its Claude chatbot in coding and other arenas, expects to break even for the first time in 2028, the documents show. By contrast, OpenAI forecasts its operating losses that year to swell to about 74 billion, or roughly 3/4 of revenue, thanks to ballooning spend on computing costs. The ChatGPT maker also expects to burn through roughly 14 times as much cash as Anthropic before turning a profit in 2030. All right, in layman's terms, here's what that means. And I've been saying this all along, right? That I know that Anthropic is much more profitable per customer. And I think that they're playing two very different games, right? Anthropic is never going to catch OpenAI when it comes to users, right? But what they are likely crushing OpenAI on is revenue per user. Even CEO Sam Altman for OpenAI has said that on many plans, they lose money by default, right? Yet, this reporting is showing that Anthropic is expected to be profitable by 2028, which is pretty early because a lot of earlier estimates said best case, OpenAI might not turn a profit until 2030, right? Which is normal, right? A lot of people look at this and they put on their AI is a bubble. Oh my gosh, ChatGPT is so popular, yet they're losing billions of dollars. That's how startups work, right? I've given long receipts on this show, companies that were in the red for 10 years or longer and are now the biggest and most profitable companies in the world. That's how it works, right? If you're going to be a world-changing company, you start as a startup, you take on debt, for the most part, you're probably going to be burning through billions of dollars for 5 to 15 years. That's how it goes. And hopefully then you make it out on the other side as, a Fortune 100, Fortune 50 company. And a lot of people don't realize by the math right now, OpenAI is the largest private company in the world. And if they were a public company today, based on their valuation, they would be a Fortune 20 or a top 20 company in the US. Right. So they are no small beans, and it is relatively normal to be burning through cash. However, when compared to Anthropic, this might be another thing, right? The Gemini 3 release, the Opus 4.5, and then the news, right, that Anthropic is seemingly being looked at a little bit more favorably on the markets and by potential investors than OpenAI is. So speaking of the public narrative punching OpenAI this week, there's another thing that happened in the last couple of days, right before the code red. There's this kind of little, we'll call it an ad controversy, right? I don't know. I chuckle at this one. But it caused OpenAI a lot of bad press. And according to reports, ads is one avenue that they're going to pause on. So essentially, you had a lot of people complaining on Twitter, right? And they're like, I'm a paid subscriber, right? I'm paying $20, I'm paying $200 a month. And look at this, I'm getting an ad. It was a narrative that maybe OpenAI, and I said so myself, probably the UI UX of this was not the best. It was actually an in-app nudge. People might argue, right? It's not technically an ad, even if it might look like an ad, and it could be construed as an ad, right? A lot of this was nudges, usually unrelated to what you were searching for, right? So usually an ad is something related to what you are searching for, right? So if you're, chatting with ChatGPT about the latest, I don't know, Bears game, or doing some deep research on something, and you get a little nudge for installing the Peloton app on ChatGPT, right? So it's not sending you to other websites or pushing products. It's trying to get you to install ChatGPT apps, right? A big play that they're trying to do there as well. So these are technically in-app nudges to try to get you to use ChatGPT apps. People lost their mind and said, oh my gosh, I'm paying money and here's these ads, right? So OpenAI did disable the feature 2 days ago after Chief Research Officer Mark Chen admitted on Twitter that, quote unquote, we fell short, and then they disabled the feature. So more or less, OpenAI didn't even put ads out there, and everyone lost their noodles, right? And there's all these articles that came out in the press about how this was just a bad look. So it's been a bad, tough couple of weeks, especially the last maybe 2 weeks for OpenAI, that has maybe led to this code red. But ready? Saving the hot take Tuesday, the hot take for near the end of the show here. I think here's the secret. Here's the key. Here's what no one's talking about. No one. Ready? This is one of those small little nuggets that, if you are sitting around dorking with your friends, your colleagues, if you're on an AI team, at your work, here's one thing you can pull out of your hat and everyone's going to look at you and be like, wow, you know what you're talking about. I think one of the reasons why ChatGPT is losing its ground is because the default chat model is bad, right? Sam Altman said in August that previously only 1% of free users used a thinking model, and only 7% of paid users used a thinking model. Those numbers have increased, right? I believe to now up to 24% of paid users, but still the overwhelming majority of everyone using ChatGPT is not using paid models, or sorry, not using thinking models. I would never. And my wife always gives me a hard time, right? Because she's like, hey, can you, ChatGPT this quick? And I'm like, yeah, I can. Right. And then 2 minutes later, she's like, okay, what's the answer? And I'm like, you got to give it time, right? I got to use the right model, right? Otherwise, just go into, Google's AI mode, right? If you want the juice, you got to wait. I would never use the default ChatGPT model for absolutely anything. And I might lose a couple of friends at OpenAI for saying that, but I don't think you should either, because it's not good. And the stats show that. All right, so let's look at LM Arena. Talk about, unfortunately, OpenAI losing some of their ground. Even their best model, their high thinking model, right now is not a top 5 model. All right, so it is at number 6 on LM Arena. LM Arena is essentially blind taste test for large language models. So it's not a top 5 model, which is crazy. It's crazy to say. Because essentially all the way through the end of 2024, OpenAI was always the top model on LM Arena, and it was usually never even close. All right, so now they've lost that. But here's the thing. 93% of you users, and probably you if you're listening, sorry, I'm calling you out. And I need to call you out, because if you're listening to this podcast still after 32 minutes, I want you to get better results. I want you to know. Here's the reality. If you are using the default chat mode, right, the instant, or sometimes if you're using auto and it doesn't route you to a thinking model, you're not using a good model. You're using a poor model, right? So GPT-5.1 is the 15th highest ranked model on LM Arena. And the previous version, GPT-5 Chat, 21st. Right? It's not just LM Arena. If we look at artificial analysis, a great resource, third-party benchmarking, it's an aggregate of all these different benchmarks, right? You'll see GPT-5.1 high right there, tied for second with Claude Opus 4.5, but behind Gemini 3 Pro, okay? So tied for second, GPT-5.1 high, good model, right? Default model, not even in top 20. Oof. That's one of the reasons. That's one of the reasons why Gemini and other people are taking the crown, right? And that's why I think, right, my Twitter feed is just literally just people talking about AI. And I've seen story after story, people just being like, it seems like ChatGPT is not as good as it was before. And it's like, yes, stop using the default model. Use the thinking mode, right? That's why sometimes you got to use multiple tools because, yeah, if I want something fast, I might just use Gemini 3 or use Google AI mode, right? But sometimes if I want something done the right way, specifically, and if I want to see in the chain of thought, come on, Google, please add this in the chain of thought. If I want to see where the model is deciding agentically to go into research, right? I can see that in GPT-5 Pro or GPT-5 thinking, right? I can't see that, unfortunately, in Gemini 3 Pro. So you shouldn't be using the default model ever until they improve it, right? And maybe by this time that I'm done yapping on this podcast, the GPT-5 2 will be out, or maybe later this week, and maybe it'll be a different story. Maybe it'll be a good base model. But that's one of the reasons why I think that so many people have just been like, oh, ChatGPT is not very good anymore, or why they're losing so much market share. And it hasn't really been talked about. Well, the default chat model that reportedly before 93% of even paid users were using, and now about 76% of paid users are still using that model. And it's not good, right? I'm sorry. When I say it stinks, it's obviously world-changing model, right? 4 years ago, if we ever would have thought we would have something like this, but comparatively, it's not good, right? You don't want to be handing off important business tasks or anything, that matters to you to a model that's not even a top 20 model. It's not a good call. You shouldn't be doing it. So, start to wrap up here. Is the code red warning a sign that ChatGPT has officially lost the AI crown? No, it's not. It's not. Here's why. ChatGPT still dominates. Like I said, 800 million weekly active users. Also, OpenAI just came out with a new kind of state of AI in the enterprise report yesterday that we shared about in our newsletter. That's why you got to read the newsletter, right? We don't miss anything. It shows that their user message volume has increased 8-fold over the past year, which is insane. Also, the new RAMP AI index shows that 36% of US businesses use ChatGPT Enterprise versus only 14% for Anthropic. So yeah, I still don't think from a market share perspective, it's still ChatGPT, and that's going to take a while, right? Google's doing a lot to claw into that, but also it's all these, I think the benchmark headlines and the social media drama have probably outpaced the actual real world usage shifts. And so far, it's just Google that's actually getting close in that department. So no, ChatGPT hasn't lost its major crown, although I think there's more crowns, and maybe, ChatGPT had 5 of them, a year ago or 13 months ago. They don't anymore. The new reality, I think there's 3 companies and they now hold 3 very different crowns. So Anthropic leads in coding and agentic models for now, right? This could obviously change tomorrow, next week, next month. I think Google leads in reasoning, multimodality, and distribution, right? They have an unfair advantage, right? With Google AI mode, but also rolling out Gemini in search, Android, cloud, everywhere else. I mean, the Google Gemini's everywhere, right? I sneeze and I think Google Gemini's in my Kleenex, right? My wife just screenshotted me and it's like, oh my gosh, like Google Gemini's in, Google Maps. It's everywhere, right? The distribution advantage that they have is unfair, but still, OpenAI, even after all that, they still lead in consumer mindshare. The word AI is still synonymous with ChatGPT, and I don't think that is going to change anytime soon, right? And the only reason we're having this conversation, right, is because if you're listening to this, myself, right, we are in a bubble, right? I'm not saying though the AI bubble, it's going to burst, the .com. No, I'm saying we are in an AI bubble, right? If you follow this frequently, if you're using it all day, every day, if you're passionate, if you're an AI enthusiast, you're probably paying way closer attention to this than 99% of the world. But luckily, I kind of live in Chicago. Not kind of live in Chicago. I live in Chicago, right? But what I'm saying is I'm kind of away from the big kind of ongoing narrative. And I think that the narrative in Silicon Valley, in San Francisco, right out in California, it gets blown up a little bit. So because it just seems like it's, life and death, everything is AI. And yes, it's hard to succeed in business, or even it's going to become harder to have a personal life that's thriving without using AI, because it is literally everywhere. You can't use, really any app without using AI right now. But I think it's just this narrative has been a little bit overblown. But here's the other thing. Hot take to end it here. OpenAI is not going anywhere, right? Yeah, the market share, but let me share some more stats here from SimilarWeb. So they put out a recent stat on app stickiness, right? So even though OpenAI has lost some of their market share to Google Gemini, stickiness, or the daily reliance that an app has, ChatGPT has a 33% stickiness rate. All right. And most other large language models, Perplexity, Copilot, Gemini, Gemini's is actually pretty low at 5%, Grok 14%, Claude 16%. What does this mean? The people that are using ChatGPT are using it way more frequently than any other large language model. And it's not even close. It is stickier, right? And what does that mean? And why am I bringing this up at the end? Ads. Yeah, I know people are going to hate it, but another stat, all right, from SimilarWeb. So it showed the average query length. And I think this is important, right? The average Google query length is 3.4 words. The average AI mode query length inside Google's AI mode is 10.4 words. All right. In ChatGPT, it is 60 words. So what does this mean, and why does this have anything to do with ChatGPT not losing its crown? Ads are coming. Yes, they reportedly got paused with this code red, although right before that, the week before this, we did see instances or references to ChatGPT ads in an Android ChatGPT app leak. But ads are coming, right? And yeah, they may not be coming now until the first quarter of 2026. But these last two charts show you why OpenAI is in no trouble. The platform is stickier than anything else, and it's not even close. And the context that users share with ChatGPT is so much. It is much more personalized than anything else. All right, so that's a wrap, y'all. But let me just say this. It's probably a good thing that OpenAI has this code red, right? Because, like I said, one of the underlying issues that no one is talking about is the default model that so many people are using day to day. Maybe you've been using it for your business. Maybe you've been using it to launch a side project, just using it in your personal life. I don't know. And maybe you've noticed, like a lot of people, hey, it seems like this ChatGPT is not as good as it once was. Or, oh my gosh, like, Salesforce CEO Mark Benioff, when he, is using ChatGPT every day, and yeah, maybe there's some recency bias there, since GPT-5 launched in August, not very good. GPT-5.1, not very good, especially when you're using the default chat model. But then when you go use the default chat model of Google Gemini, you're getting Gemini 2.0, or you're getting Gemini 3 Pro, right? So there's a big drop off there. So it is probably for OpenAI's best interest to go through this code red, to hit a pause, even though I'd love to see, Atlas get, developed more and faster, and Pulse, and even ads. I maybe I'm the only one. I can't wait for ChatGPT ads, right? But maybe it's a good thing, because maybe OpenAI is going to catch back up in the model game, the game that they technically created and dominated. But for now, Google's kind of taking the crown. But if I'm OpenAI, I'm not sweating it. All right. I hope today's show was helpful and maybe a little bit entertaining, bringing you Hot Take Tuesday. Thank you for tuning in. If you missed anything, don't worry. It's all going to be recapped on our website in today's daily newsletter at youreverydayai.com. Thanks for tuning in. Hope to see you back tomorrow and every day for more Everyday AI. Thanks, y'all.